Hey, multifarious fisherman here. This is 7 Fish. We're in the office. I am going to talk today a little bit about fishing rods. There's an awful lot of options on fishing rods, and how do you know which one to buy? I'm going to talk to you a little bit about rod design, rod selection. When you go into a store and you look at all of the rods on the racks, there's so many options, so many differences. How does a person really know what it is that they need, or what maybe tool will help them catch more fish? Two primary variables in rods, other than obviously casting, spinning. We did cover that in a video before, and hopefully you're familiar with that. If not, there is a video right here that goes over casting, spinning, and the difference between the two rod types. But in rods, there's two variables that will help you determine what rod is going to be best for your application. One of the variables is rod power. Power really describes how much a rod flexes under load. And when I talk about rod power, on the rod blank, it will indicate that with words like ultralight, light, medium medium heavy, heavy, and extra heavy. Basically what those words indicate to you is what lure weight and what line weight is that rod appropriate for. A lot of times that'll be determined by what fish am I fishing for. So a person that is fishing bluegills, let's say, and throwing lighter jig weights like 32nd ounce or 64th of an ounce, an ultralight rod is going to be appropriate for that. It's going to handle the 2 to 4 pound test you're probably using. If I'm fishing muskies, I'm fishing lures that weigh 1.5 ounces, say, to 6 or even 8 ounces, half a pound. You're going to need a heavy and extra heavy rod to handle that. And the rod blank will indicate to you what lure weights are appropriate. You can fudge that a little bit, but generally those are good guidelines as they're printed on the rod. Casting the lure weights outside of that range becomes less efficient, less successful. If I put a 32nd ounce jig on a medium heavy on this medium heavy rod and I'm throwing that around, what I'm going to find is I'm not going to get any distance on my cast. A lot of effort. It's like throwing a baseball without breaking your wrist. You're never going to get any distance on that. You need that rod to flex when you throw. You want that rod to load and unload as you throw so that you generate enough speed for that lure to go out. Similarly, if I'm throwing a heavy weight on a light rod, it's like trying to throw without stiffening your shoulder, using those shoulder muscles like they're intended to, stepping into the throw, and that's going to generate the maximum amount of power because you're using all of the power in your lower body to help move your shoulder forward while you're making that throw. Same deal with the rod. I want to load that rod, have enough power in the bottom section of that rod to move that tip forward. The rod will load and unload like it should, but I need enough power to actually get that lure moving forward too. If I bend that rod too much as I'm casting, it's just going to lob it out there. My lure's going to go a mile high and still get no distance. So you really need that combination of power and lure weight to match up so that you can make an efficient cast. Action is the other variable I mentioned. And a lot of people think action, you think, oh, medium action, medium heavy action, but really that's the rod's power. The action comes with that next word. So if you buy a medium heavy, and it'll be indicated on the blank when you're looking at the rod, but it might say medium heavy fast, or medium heavy extra fast, or even medium heavy moderate. What those words, what that second set of words is telling you, that's the action of the rod. And a fast action rod anymore is pretty much the standard rod. There's nothing indicating the action of the rod on the rod blank. It's probably a fast. Action is where that bend occurs in the rod. An extra fast rod will bend out at the tip, but not much bend in the body of the rod blank. A fast rod will bend deeper into that rod so that you get deflection further back. And the extra fast is going to bend out at the tip. The fast is going to bend further down the rod blank. And a moderate bends almost to the butt section. It'll bend pretty far back into the blank, halfway or so. What are the advantages and disadvantages? How do I decide what I want? Well, a lot of that's going to be technique specific. I would always rather fight a fish with a rod that is moderate, with a rod that has flex deep into it. I like that rod to deflect a long way. And then if a fish runs at me or if it jumps and shakes its head, there's enough flex in that rod to take up the slack, keep tension on that hook so that I don't lose a fish. An extra fast rod that only bends at the tip, if the fish runs towards you, you have to really catch up quick, because that rod isn't taken up very much, and he'll slack you and you'll end up losing fish. Same deal on a jump. If it's a long fish like a pike or a muskie and that bend is only occurring in the tip, it's hard to keep tension on that, because as he comes at you, that rod straightens and it's not going to pull, it's going to slack at that point. And you don't want that slack line, because they'll throw hooks. So if I'd always rather fight a fish on a moderate, why would I buy a fast or an extra fast? Well, there are other advantages to a fast or an extra fast. If we hold fast as kind of the standard rod, we'll talk about extra fast. The faster a rod is, the more feel that you'll get at your hand. This isn't a great analogy, but it does paint the picture somewhat. It's obviously very extreme. If I take a 3-foot piece of rope and I put it in your hand and I hit the end of that with a stick, you're not going to feel anything in your hand. The tip of that rope's going to move back and forth and you'll feel nothing up here. If I give you a 3-foot piece of rebar and I hit it with a stick, you're going to feel like I'm hitting you in the hand with the stick. It's going to transmit everything, because that rebar isn't deflecting at all. It's just transmitting that all right back to your hand. Similarly, a rod that only deflects at the tip and has a lot of stiffness through the butt, when a fish picks up, it'll transmit that back to your hand better. So when would I want to run an extra fast and when would I want to run a moderate? Well, an extra fast is great for presentations where you have to feel the fish bite. If I'm running this plastic worm, or if I'm running a jig and pig or a walleye jig, live bait jig, or anything where I need to feel that bite before I can set a hook, definitely going to have an advantage with the extra fast. However, if I'm running a type of lure that the fish tends to hook themselves, spinnerbaits, I run a lot of spinnerbaits. Bass, when they hit them, first of all, you don't need to worry about feeling it. They smash them a lot of times. Secondly, they're generally hooked the minute they hit them. As soon as they hit that, it's already hook set. I don't have to do a big swinging hook set. Sometimes I do anyway, but if I'm running a moderate when he hits, he's got enough force to set the hook already on himself, but that rod will give and it won't tear a hole and it won't, cause me to lose that fish. Another example of a lure that fish hook themselves on is crankbaits. Again, if I'm running a crankbait, and by the time the fish hits it and I feel it, he's already hooked. I don't have to do a big hook set. The bass will hit it, he'll hook himself, and that moderate rod will give me a good ability to play that fish and land them. Topwater baits, you don't need to feel that bite because you can see it. People have a tendency to be too fast setting hook with a topwater bait anyway and pulling the bait away from them. If I've got to load that rod before it pulls on the fish, it slows my reaction time, my hook sets down a little. Because a lot of times when you see that bass break the water, you're setting that hook. He doesn't even have it in his mouth yet, and if you can pull it away from him, if you're quick enough, you'll literally pull it away from him and he won't get it. Because you see him come out of the water a lot of times before he actually physically grabs it, you are too early and you need to wait a step or 2 steps. And a moderate rod will help with that. So another variable in terms of determining what it is that you want to run for a rod would be rod length. The length of the rod will determine a few things about how it fishes as well. Convenience can be a factor, and there are people who just don't want to run a long rod, don't want to transport or deal with a long rod. Generally speaking, I do like to fish a longer rod given equal circumstances. There's a few exceptions to that, we'll go over them. The main reason that I like a longer rod is with that rod length, I have the ability to move more line when I'm setting a hook. So if I go from this position to this position, a longer rod moves physically more line, I'll get a better hook set. If I'm trying to steer that fish around stuff, I'll have more control over that hooked fish because I have more reach without moving my feet. If I'm fishing on a bank, generally speaking, you'll cast farther with a longer rod. Because of that, if I'm fishing from a bank and I'm limited to what I can get to for fish, I would rather always run that, have the longer cast. If I cast 20% farther, I'm going to get in front of more fish because I'm fishing water that I can't fish with a shorter cast. When you are vertical jigging, when you're fishing straight down, that's definitely a spot where having a shorter rod, less distance to transmit that feel of the bite from the tip to the hand. Don't care about casting distance. I'm not casting, I'm just letting that jig straight down. So having it, holding it close to the boat gives you a little more control. You know you're straight over the fish, so your hook set should be pretty solid. Hopefully this has been helpful for you as far as understanding rod power and action, and the next time you go into the store and you see racks full of rods and you're trying to decide what tool is going to give you the most advantage when you're on the water. If there's anything that you have questions on where we can help you by answering those questions and you comment, maybe we can do a video to help you with that. I appreciate your coming to join us today. If you enjoyed it, certainly you can like the video. We do hope that you'll join us next week, Tuesday for a tip video, Friday for a full length. We're having fun. Hopefully you guys are too. See you next week.